Your fantasy draft is coming up and you're looking for the #1 strategy. Well, you're in the right place because I have you covered. Believe it or not, I've drafted hundreds of teams so far this offseason, and this is what I believe is no doubt about it the #1 strategy for 2024 fantasy. And what I'll actually do is take you round by round through this draft strategy as I do a draft live for all of you right now. This is going to be absolutely live, and you can see the first round. I actually got the 5th pick, which I think is a great spot. Anytime in those first 5 or 6 picks this year is great. The only running back off the board so far was Christian McCaffrey, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, believe it or not, went 4th overall ahead of some other players. I don't think that's a terrible idea, but I personally think this sets up great for my strategy right now. And that strategy for me is generally speaking to draft a reliable player in both rounds 1 and 2, which most of these guys are, but I want to get a running back if I can with my first pick. And as you can see the draft board right now, Jamar Chase is there, sure. Bijan Robinson is there, sure. But for me, it's actually going to be, if I pull up my rankings right here, the running back tiers in the blueprint, for me, Breece Hall is ahead of Bijan Robinson for a lot of reasons we stated in the past. So I'm going to go ahead and go get me in this draft one Breece Hall to start my draft off. So my roster in round 1 is starting off with Breece Hall. And now here's the deal. I like starting off with a running back because I think rounds 7 through 9 are loaded with great running backs talents compared to the wide receivers. So we can get a couple there. We get our stud early and then maybe wait for those rounds. And now I'm taking Breece Hall over Bijan Robinson for a few reasons. I think he has the most improved offensive line this offseason, a bottom 5 unit to now borderline top 5 unit, adding an offensive tackle in the draft in the first round, adding Tyron Smith, a great left tackle, Morgan Moses, all these players. And then you could see last year that he led all running backs in receptions and receiving yards. Maybe this changes with a new quarterback under center, but it just shows his ability in that department. He led all running backs in broken tackles as well. And this is a guy who was coming off of a torn ACL without Aaron Rodgers, with a bad offensive line. Now, all of those things have actually improved a year forward as he's still in his prime. All right, so now we're in round 2 of the draft. A bunch of players came off the board. You can see them all right here. A bunch of great players, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor. Actually, Isaiah Pacheco goes extremely early right here at the beginning of the second round, end of the first round, right around there. You can see Travis Kelce's the first tight end off the board, which is not common these days. Let's see who's still available. You have Devontae Adams, you have Chris Olave. I don't want a running back right now, so I'm actually going to filter by wide receiver. Drake London, Mike Evans, a lot of great options. Jalen Waddle. Now in this range, honestly, I would take any of these guys, and if we pull up my fantasy blueprint right now, the guy that's left in my tiers, if I'm looking at the wide receiver position, is Drake London as the clear best available. He's my number 8 receiver, but there's a couple of nice options. Olave and Mike Evans I also find valuable, but I went ahead and drafted Drake London. So our start is Breece Hall. We have our great elite #1 running back. He can anchor our team nicely, and then Drake London as my #1 receiver, and I think everything is trending up for him. Obviously, as Kirk Cousins now has a pass-first offensive coordinator in Zach Robinson, which should help some things out on the offense, of course, passing a lot more. And this is a guy in Drake London who last year only 73% of his targets were catchable, meaning more than a quarter of them were uncatchable. That ranks second highest in the NFL behind only Garrett Wilson, who is also playing with bad quarterbacks. Things are going to get better for Drake London, and I believe he's actually going to be a reliable player in 2024, which actually takes us into our first tip. I said it earlier, but draft reliable players in round 1 through 2. You cannot afford to miss on these players, so that's why I'm not taking guys like Puka Nacua, who are a little bit sketchy for me this year, and instead getting guys like Breece Hall or an Amon-Ra St. Brown if you can. So now we enter round 3, and a lot of great players just went off the board. We actually saw Sam Laporta, the second tight end, go. We got our first quarterback off the board in Josh Allen, and our second quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, which I think Mahomes is great. Should be having a bounce back year this year with all those great wide receivers and speedy wide receivers added. But this is the time in the draft, and here's another tip for you, that I want to be looking for elite mobile upside quarterbacks. A couple of them just went, but the guy who's still on the board is my #1 quarterback this year, and that's Jalen Hurts. Yes, I know he's in a new offense. We're going to get Jalen Hurts here in round 3. Our offense now looks like Jalen Hurts, perhaps the best wide receiver or quarterback in best quarterback in fantasy, and then Breece Hall, perhaps the best running back this year in fantasy, and this is what it sets up for. It's setting up for a team that could have a lot of cheat codes, and Jalen Hurts specifically, new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore. I'm not too concerned about that because this is a guy in Jalen Hurts that we know has that elite mobile cheat code in terms of the rushing yards and the rushing touchdowns. That's not going to change as a huge part of his game, and if anything, I think that Kellen Moore is going to lead to more motion, a quicker pace of play, which should mean more plays getting off, and overall a better performance for this team, and just more plays, more offensive output. So honestly, this is like my most ideal start. I would like to get Jalen Hurts in round 4, but he rarely falls there this year. But last year, you got to take him in round 2. So I'll take him in round 3 this year for sure. So now I'm in round 4. I got my quarterback. I'm not really interested in a running back based on who they're currently available. We already have Breece Hall. If we pull up tight end, who's available right now? Trey McBride, round 4, I'm not really interested. Dalton Kincaid, a little bit early for me. So I'm still looking at the wide receiver position. If I go over to the fantasy blueprint right here, you can see that currently at the wide receiver position, my best available is Jalen Waddle. He's still on the board. Malik Neighbors after that. Could he fall to round 5? That would be the ideal build for us. And also Devonta Smith. So like these 3 guys, getting them in round 4, having this nice 5th pick, in my opinion, is fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and get Jalen Waddle here. I don't think he'll make it if we go again. And let's look at my roster right now. Drake London, Jalen Waddle. I feel like that's great. Waddle 3 straight years of 1,000+ yards in the NFL, and that's with Tyreek Hill the last 2 years. Imagine if Tyreek was to actually miss a game or 2 or 3 instead of just leaving games early and then coming back. Waddle would have immense upside those weeks alone, plus always being great besides that. So now we enter round 5 of the draft, and this is where we can maybe start to get different in my opinion. You can see a lot of great players went off the board. Cooper Kupp goes off the board. I think he's being wildly underrated as an end of the 4th round pick in 12-team drafts. Devonta Smith at the end of the 4th round is great. You can see some 5th round. Look at this tight end run. Kyle Pitts, Trey McBride, George Kittle. I mean, I could see Kyle Pitts, but maybe a round too early. Dalton Kincaid is actually still available in this draft right now. If you were to go over to the tight end position, you can see that Dalton Kincaid right here, still available in round 5. I'm a little bit interested there because I would say that he is an elite tight end, might be the number 1, believe it or not, receiver on the Buffalo Bills this year with all their guys, Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis gone. So Kincaid is on my mind, but could we get another receiver here to fill out our wide receiver room? You can start 3 in this league. And for me personally, in round 5, the fact that Malik Nabers is still here, he does fall to round 5, beginning of round 5, middle sometimes, which is where he's at right now. It's just really hard for me to ignore Malik Nabers. So I'm going to go ahead and draft Malik Nabers here. And then if I pull up my roster, you can see where we're currently sitting at. We're currently sitting at Jalen Hurts. Feel great about that. Breece Hall, of course, we like that. He's arguably the number 1 overall pick in fantasy this year for some people. And then you pull up my wide receiver room. We have Drake London, Jalen Waddle, Malik Nabers. A bunch of young receivers. A 4th-year receiver in Waddle, a 3rd-year guy in Drake London, and now Malik Nabers, a rookie. And honestly, there might not be anybody higher on Malik Nabers than me. Because Malik Nabers, not only is he extremely talented, just turned 21 years old. You look at his athletic profile, ran a 4.4. At his pro day, he ran like a 4.34. So depending on which one you trust a little bit more. Not only does he have all this going for him, he's compared closely to guys like Amari Cooper and Julio Jones coming out of college, AJ Green, these types of alpha receivers, and he has the draft capital going top 10 overall in the draft to back it up. He also put up the production at LSU while competing with another 1st round pick in Brian Thomas Jr. He still goes out and has 1,000 yards in his junior or his sophomore year, and then his junior, because he comes out early, puts up over 1,500 yards. This is a guy now going to the New York Giants who have his biggest competition being guys like Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, and every single day right now in camp, I've been putting stories out on Instagram, kind of reacting to news. Every day there's just beat reporters out of the New York Giants camp that are saying things like, look, I don't want to be the one to say this, but Malik Nabers is the most dynamic and explosive player we've seen in Giants camp since Odell Beckham Jr. So we're talking like nearly a decade ago, 7 years ago. And that's also factoring in that Darren Waller was in this camp, an athletic tight end last year. Saquon Barkley's been on this team, one of the most dynamic and explosive backs. And they're saying Malik Nabers is even more impressive than those guys coming in at their positions. So you can see my starting lineup so far on the right-hand side of the screen. And I also want to point out, so I got my 3 wide receivers here. Even if you're in a 2 wide receiver league, this would be a flex guy Malik Nabers would fall into. But I also want to say that right now I have another running back spot available, and I have a tight end and a flex spot available. But if my next pick, which would be my 6th pick in round 6 is where we're heading, if that was to be a wide receiver, that's fine, because I'm not somebody who wants to fill out their starting lineup first. Here's a tip. You don't have to fill your starting lineup. Just take the best available player. Because sure, they might be on your bench for a week or 2, but eventually they can fill in for injuries. Eventually they could be a breakout player, and now you have one of the best players in the league on your team, like a Puka Nacua last season. And at the very worst case scenario, if I was to draft another receiver here as we enter round 6, and we're about to show you who I get, then you can just have some trade bait options, if anything, instead of taking a less talented player that's not going to help your team down the road one way or another. So now we are in round 6, and again, this is the time that I am okay to start taking a running back, some of the best available players. James Conner, I'm not really on him. David Montgomery, I am interested in David Montgomery this season, but then some great wide receivers. A wide receiver 1 in Terry McLaurin. Chris Godwin, a great number 2 option for his team. Deontay Johnson, a wide receiver 1 on his team. Christian Kirk, wide receiver 1 on his. So there's a lot of great receivers still that in this specific lead will fill a flex spot for me. So let's take a look at the fantasy blueprint and see who's the best available player. So if we pull up my best availables right now, David Montgomery, Najee Harris, these types of running backs, Jalen Moore and Jonathan Brooks. Ideally, I'd be able to get 1 or 2 of these guys in round 7 or 8. I can definitely get David Montgomery right now if I don't want to risk it. Christian Kirk at the wide receiver position. And then there's a pretty big gap after Kirk. Like Jaden Reed, I'm not too high on. Chris Godwin, there's a wide gap there. We saw some other running backs that I were interested in. Guys like Zamir White went. Guys like Evan Ingram and Dalton Kincaid went at the tight end position. So I'm probably holding off at tight end for now. So for me right now, it comes down to David Montgomery, who probably won't be there at my next pick. A Deontay Johnson probably falls to me in round 7, or a Christian Kirk, who is probably my best available player. So I do like to lean wide receiver or running backs in round 7 through 9. There's a chance here, though, that you don't have to follow these rules hardcore, right? You have to see how the draft plays out. Some people reached on some other players, so guys like David Montgomery have fallen. So there is a world where I can take David Montgomery in round 6 instead of just sticking to this hard rule that I have to take running backs in round 7. Again, it's a guideline, because then in round 7, there's a pretty good chance that a Christian Kirk is still available, as you can see right here, a Deontay Johnson, who I'm very highly interested in, or somehow a Chris Godwin can fall. Now you have these 3 receiver options just a couple of picks later. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is take David Montgomery, and then we're going to, fingers crossed, have one of those 3 receivers I was just talking about stay, because I was ready to take them there anyway. anyways. We knew Montgomery wouldn't be there, so let's see what happens now in round 7. And this is why it's very important for this next tip to be drafting with your own tiers, player tiers, not rankings, not the site rankings, because tiers let you differentiate between players and how much better they are than another player, and even across different positions. Now you can see the picks after my pick right here. You can see I took David Montgomery right here, then a run of running backs went after this. DeAndre Swift, James Conner, Jonathan Brooks. Honestly, this team right here, team 1, makes a huge mistake because you can see all the running backs that went. Zamir White is 1, Montgomery 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 running backs in a row went. Then you take Zach Moss with the number 6 running back in a row. You're just not getting a good value, in my opinion. If just a bunch of running backs just went, you're probably getting the worst value there. But here's the big thing. Christian Kirk goes, okay, he was our best available. We took a gamble there. Chris Godwin goes, okay, but here's why I'm happy. Because we still have wide receivers in Terry McLaurin in round 7, a number 1 receiver on his team, and Deontay Johnson. I like Terry McLaurin, but I have to go with Deontay Johnson here. This is a dude in Deontay Johnson that ranks top 5 in targets since 2020 in the NFL, and that's while playing with brutal quarterbacks in Pittsburgh the last couple of years. And now Deontay is going to a team that are currently in camp. They're saying that the offense, his own head coach, new head coach Dave Canales, coming over from Tampa Bay, led them to the playoffs last year, made Baker Mayfield be a $100 million quarterback this offseason. Deontay's now the number 1 option for the former number 1 overall pick Bryce Young, who I'm not personally giving up on. Neither is the team surrounding Bryce Young with talent, offensive linemen, weapons like Deontay. And you get all the reports coming out of camp right now from Dave Canales himself saying that the offense has to go through Deontay and that everything is lining up for him and Bryce Young to have a big year. So now if we look at where I'm at right now in my starting lineup, I'm feeling very, very good about this team. Like if this was my team in every single league, obviously you don't want to be tied to these same players all across the board. It's a little bit risky, but Jalen Hurts, love that. Hard to get a better quarterback. In my opinion, he's my number 1 quarterback. Breece Hall, arguably the number 1 running back in fantasy up there at McCaffrey. David Montgomery as my running back too, a dude who averaged 80 yards a game and 13 touchdowns last year, and now I get him in round 6. I know Jahmyr Gibbs is there, but he's still behind the number 1 offensive line, gonna see 12 to 14 carries. Drake London, we talked about him. Waddle, we talked about him. Neighbors, we talked about him, and we just talked about Deontay Johnson. This is my starting lineup. Obviously still need a tight end here, but I'm fine to keep waiting on that depending on who's available. I'll look now in round 8 for a tight end, but I'm also going to lead running back. If we can get my 3rd running back here, a guy who has some upside, maybe a Trey Benson, the rookie, in round 9 or 8, I'm feeling pretty good about that position as well. And before we get into this second half of the draft and where all these upside league winners are and the guys that you really want to target, do you want to win your fantasy league? I know a ton of you do. Well, it's pretty simple. If you want to do so, click this button to get access to my fantasy blueprint, which will help you do just that. And this year, if you sign up through one of our 2 partners here on this page, it'll be linked down below. The blueprint becomes risk-free. It's just a $10 payment for the entire year. And if you don't make your fantasy playoffs, I give you that $10 payment right back. No questions asked. It gives you all the tools to not just dominate your draft, but win your fantasy league matchups every single week and get towards that fantasy playoffs and a championship. All you have to do to get access, follow these 2 simple steps that'll be on the link below right now, or you can also click the QR code that's on the screen right here to join the over 10,000 people. We're actually pushing out towards 12,000 people that have access and are currently using the fantasy blueprint heading into this year. One of your league mates might be using it, so you kind of need it now just to be catching up to them. So now we're entering rounds 8 through 9, and we talked about maybe finding a tight end, but another big strategy, lean running backs over wide receivers here because it's rare to find a wide receiver. Only 4 since 2010 have finished as top 12 options in this range when more running backs have. Okay, since my last pick of Deontay Johnson, you can see what happened and went off the board. A tight end goes off the board in Njoku, a couple of receivers. Kyler Murray lasts till the end of round 7. Great spot to be taking Kyler Murray. To me, one of the most rostered quarterbacks in my portfolio right now. Austin Eckler in round 8, in my opinion, is absolutely brutal. I wouldn't even be drafting him in round 10 of drafts. The Packers receivers go. I think that's fine. I was looking at Dallas Goedert to get in round 8 if we were going to go tight end. One of the better tight ends left on the board. He's gone. And then you can see Tony Pollard was a nice pick. I was looking at him. Nick Chubb going in round 8 is crazy. They're already saying he's not going to start the season. Probably starts the season on the PUP list. Misses at least 4 games. They're hoping at some point to get him back this year. Nick Chubb in round 8 is crazy. I'm not even touching him until round 13, 14, 15, and then I'm probably getting someone else even then. So since the tight ends are not all that appealing for me, if we look on the fantasy blueprint right now, the best available tight ends are currently guys like Brock Bowers, Pat Freiermuth. I think we can wait a couple of rounds on these guys. If I can get a Pat Freiermuth in round 9 or round 10, that's fine. But look what was gifted to us. Najee Harris in round 8. This is a guy who normally goes in probably round 7, sometimes round 6, gifted to us in round 8 of drafts as our running back 3. I'm fine to start this guy, the starting running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who, oh yeah, improved their offensive line this season, spending their first 3 out of 4 draft picks on that unit. And then they bring in Arthur Smith, who has been one of the best run game coaches the last 4 years with the Titans and the Falcons, and last year led the league in running when trailing by 7 points and wants to do the same he's already stated this year, run a lot. So yes, I know Najee is competing with Jalen Warren, and I'm a fan of Jalen Warren this year as well. But look, first of all, anytime a guy falls like 10 to 15 picks past ADP, and it'll happen a couple of times in your draft for sure. We got lucky here that Najee did fall for us. Anytime that happens, they're probably a good pick, but you're still looking at a guy who's just 26 years old, who, yeah, they didn't sign to the final year of their deal, but the way that the Pittsburgh Steelers do business, they don't screw their players. Najee Harris is going going to get fully used this year. And whether they re-sign him or not after this year, they're going to make sure he has the opportunities to show another team that he's still a good player. So here's the rest of the picks after I went. Brian Robinson's a nice pick, but look at this. TJ Hawkinson already probably going to miss the first 4 weeks. He's probably not coming back until November, around there. So 10 weeks miss. Brutal pick in round 8. Jordan Addison might get a suspension from the NFL or the team, miss 4 to 6 weeks or so based on past suspensions. Brutal pick in round 9. I think Raheem Mostert's a great pick right here. But look, we're now in a spot where we're in round 9. There's still a lot of good running backs left on the board, in my opinion. Devin Singletary, his own head coach, Brian Daboll, who he spent time in Buffalo with, has already stated that Motor, aka Devin Singletary, is a guy that is just going to be the guy out there. His biggest competition is now a 5th round pick, Tyron Tracy. Exciting player, but still a 5th round pick. Probably not going to have the trust of that coaching staff like Devin Singletary does. And then you can just see a bunch of other nice options. I'm not really in on Gus Edwards or Ezekiel Elliott, these older players, although they're not the worst case scenarios. I'm really in on these guys, Blake Corum and Trey Benson, but it seems like Trey Benson will probably be there in round 10, maybe even round 11. So we could go right now to Devin Singletary. The one thing I want to see is where is Pat Freiermuth in the upcoming rankings? Like Ladd McConkey's also a great pick. We have our 4 wide receivers currently. I think we can probably go ahead here and get a running back. This is one of the biggest picks in the draft. Right now we're in round 9. We're faced with either a Devin Singletary, a Trey Benson, or a Ladd McConkey, some younger players or a veteran that we know is going to see work in a skeptical offense, bad offensive line in New York that's kind of shying me away right now. So instead I'm looking at one of these guys, Chase Brown, who continues to earn first team reps in camp, Trey Benson, who is going to see a role, but James Conner is there. If I had to take one between Chase Brown and Trey Benson, I like Trey Benson more, but I'm going to be going with, I like Trey Benson more in terms of in the future and overall. Right now we'll go with Chase Brown. Maybe this is the first pick that we did where you might be going, Sal, brutal pick. You should have went Devin Singletary, guaranteed volume. But Chase Brown is in a great offense with the Bengals that are giving him more opportunities. And as long as he can pass protect this year, this guy could see a full workload. The fact that we got Najee Harris too, right? You always have to say what you drafted so far. The fact that we got Najee Harris, I felt good about my 3 running backs seeing volume. Chase Brown just has to beat out Zach Moss, who's not known to be explosive. Chase Brown is not known to stay healthy for the most part, Zach Moss. Chase Brown so far has remained healthy, and this is a guy in college who handled a full workload. I mean, if you're talking about his college workload at Illinois, this is a guy who was seeing 30 carries like it was nothing. Look at this, a 328 carry season, not even factoring in his receptions of 27. This is a guy who had 350 plus touches. Yeah, he knows how to carry a huge workload, has the athleticism. All he has to do, all the coaches said, if you could pass protect, you're going to earn more touches. I think he's going to be able to do that. He's a full-time career in doing this, and that's his only requirement. I think he'll do it. So right now, looking at my roster, I'm feeling pretty good. You have, obviously, Jalen Hurts, those running backs we took earlier. My starting receivers are Drake London, Jalen Waddle, Malik Neighbors, and then we even have Deontay Johnson on the bench, and some depth running backs. Najee Harris is in flex right now, but also Chase Brown. This feels good as we enter now round 10 of the drafts, where I'm starting to look for my tight end. I want to look for a Pat Freiermuth if he's still available. I still think Trey Benson is appealing, the rookie running back for Arizona. If he's available, we'll see what it's looking like right now, but tight end is on my mind. And here's just also a tip to keep in mind as we get into these double-digit later rounds. You want to start to prioritize younger players with upside. That's why I mentioned guys like Trey Benson, because they have this uncapped upside that we just don't know about. Okay, so I think we're in a nice spot right now since my last pick of Chase Brown. You can see some guys that went. We don't need a quarterback. Caleb Williams goes. Marquise Brown was a nice pick. He's gone. Don't really care that Bowers or JSN went. Ladd McConkey, nice pick. Can't believe somebody took Hayden Hurst this early. Odunze, fine. Nothing really here. Like Tyler Lockett, fine in round 10. I think he's a good pick there. Same with Mike Williams. But we're on the clock right now, and there's still some nice players available. I mean, look at this. Round 10. If I didn't already have Jalen Hurts, I'd take Jaden Daniels, who I believe is the best late round quarterback you're going to find this year in terms of upside. There's still some veteran running backs. Brian Thomas, a rookie receiver who might have some upside. But I want to look at my tight end position here because Pat Freiermuth is still available. And Pat Freiermuth, I think, is the best available guy in a massive tier break. If we look at my fantasy blueprint tiers right here, it goes Pat Freiermuth in round 5, and then you get some tier guys. So there's a tier break here, meaning I think these guys are a level below him, and I just don't really want to be stuck with a Cole Kmet or a Luke Musgrave, especially Cole Kmet now dealing with so much more competition. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Pat Freiermuth here. We have our starting tight end. Everything in camp is that Pat Freiermuth, no matter who the quarterback is, Russell Wilson when he was out there and healthy, or Justin Fields, whoever it is, has been targeting Pat Freiermuth in the middle of the field. And Freiermuth is going to be leaned on this year without Deontay Johnson there. You have George Pickens. Okay, he's on the outside. Can he transition into a guy who wins over the middle? It's yet to be seen. You have a rookie in Roman Wilson, who's been nice in camp, probably plays out of the slot. And then you just have these guys in Calvin Austin, Van Jefferson. None of these guys really stand out as people who should be threats to one, a George Pickens, but mostly a Pat Freiermuth. Darnell Washington's his biggest tight end threat. A rookie from last year out of Georgia, a massive guy, but mostly used as a run blocker on this offense, probably will be this year. I think Pat Freiermuth can easily be the number 2 target leader on this team. Wouldn't be shocked if he's number 1 with like 120 plus target season. So we took Freiermuth in round 10, and then honestly, we just got a lot of great options options off the board after this, meaning like guys we didn't want. Tua, Keon Coleman, Jacoby Myers, Jaden Daniels goes in round 11. Great value there for team one, especially since they started their draft with McCaffrey. A lot of upside on that team. Jerome Ford. I mean, Zach Charbonnet is like the only guy that I would have wanted that went, but look at what we're still available with here. I mean, we need to start getting receivers because we only have 4 right now, and we have a lot of running backs, but look at the running back position. I mean, just young studs. Oh, did not want to pull up Zeke there. Young studs everywhere, and Blake Corum and Trey Benson. We're in round 11 right now. I'm going Trey Benson. I was willing to take this guy in round, 8 or 9 that was, and now I get him in round 11, taken in the 3rd round with the 2nd pick in the 3rd round by the Arizona Cardinals, and the only guy in front of him is James Conner, who I've stated all off season has missed on average 3.9, so we'll call it 4 games per season in his career, and last year he still looked fine and great, but he was missing games on the injury report a lot, and now you get a guy in Trey Benson coming in, if we pull this up on Player Profiler, who comes in with great size at 6 foot, 216 pounds, set the broken tackles record in college in 2022, and then people thought he might run like a high 4.4, low 4.5s, runs in the 4.3s, a 4.39. Everything looks great. We now have our running back room. If we pull up my roster right here, the running back room is currently just loaded. I mean, in my opinion, the fact that we got Breece Hall is great. David Montgomery was nice in round 6. We obviously had Najee fall to us, so we got a little bit of luck there. Chase Brown and Trey Benson as our upside backs. If just one of them hits, imagine both, but if one of them hits, we're looking great. The fact that we took our wide receivers early gives us some core wide receivers there. We only have 4 right now through 11 rounds, but now we can start to pick up some receivers. I don't really need a quarterback since I have such a great one, and we have the running back position pretty squared away with 5 already. And that actually brings up a tip that I had in mind. The earlier you take your quarterback 1, the later you take your quarterback 2. And the same is true vice versa. If you take your first quarterback late, then you want to get your second quarterback like maybe a round or 2 later. So now we're entering round 12, and I'm looking to get some wide receivers here. You could still, Zeke is still available. Some nice wide receiver options though. This range right here of Curtis Samuel, Jameson Williams, who's getting all of the publicity right now in camp every single day. It's great news from him. Rashid Shaheed, Josh Palmer potentially could be the wide receiver 1 for his team now with the Chargers. Let's pull up, obviously they'll compete with Ladd McConkey. Let's pull up my tiers in the fantasy blueprint again. We showed it earlier. You can get it. These are my best available players. All those wide receivers we just saw. Rashid Shaheed, Josh Palmer, Curtis Samuel, and Jameson Williams. They're all basically in that same tier together. If I have to choose one here right now, obviously based on my rankings, it's going to be Shaheed. These guys are all a coin flip, especially Palmer being in the same tier and Samuel being at the top of the next tier. I'm going to give the tiebreaker based on the players I have already taken, and I just want to get a little bit of upside on target volume. I think Curtis Samuel can sneakily be his team's number 1 receiver. That won't happen with Jameson Williams at Amon-Ra, St. Brown, and Sam Laporta there. That won't happen with Rashid Shaheed with guys like Chris Olave and even Alvin Kamara there. So I'm going to go Curtis Samuel. As our wide receiver 5, it's starting to feel pretty good. If Curtis Samuel has the potential, the best wide receiver right now on the Bills, in my opinion, with Keon Coleman, a rookie there, and Khalil Shakur entering his 3rd or 4th year on the team, Samuel, the most proven player. And this is a guy that's now reunited with Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator for the Bills, who spent time with Curtis Samuel during their time together in Carolina. Samuel had his best season there, was using the backfield a lot. That's been happening in camp. And keep in mind, this guy has elite speed at 4.31. So Curtis Samuel in round 12 feels great. We now have 5 running backs, 5 receivers, and a quarterback and tight end. It doesn't always have to be that similar. That's just the way that it's playing out right now. Now we're entering round 13, and this brings up the idea, never draft a kicker or defense unless you have to based on roster rules, because you can just add one the day before week 1 starts, hold an extra running back or receiver in case somebody on your team gets hurt. You have depth right there. So you can see my last pick was Curtis Samuel in round 12. Rico Dotto, that's a nice pick, goes after that. Javon Baker maybe goes a couple rounds too early, standing out in camp, the 4th round pick for the wide receiver for the Patriots. But after this, it gets wonky. Brandon Powell, I mean, this is where you can take advantage. Ty Johnson, Isaac Orendo, who's hurt with a hamstring, the rookie, obviously behind multiple running backs in San Francisco, McCaffrey, Elijah Mitchell, even who else is over there? Jordan Mason, Isaiah Spiller. I mean, Kamani Vidal, it's an okay pick based on that. But this is another tip. Spend most of your time researching the later rounds, because as you can just see with these guys going off the board like Isaiah Spiller, Isaac Orendo in round 13, people are just drafting off of the site rankings, and these are completely wrong. I wouldn't even take these guys in like round 16 or 17. And what this is doing for us is just leaving all the opportunity in the world. If I pull it up right here, the best available wide receivers, still Jameson Williams, still Rashid Shaheed, Josh Palmer, Dontavian Wicks is still on the board, falling into round 13 right now. I think what we're looking at, Josh Palmer, Shaheed, and Jameson Williams are the guys that I'm looking at. I'm not a big fan of Jameson Williams. If he's my wide receiver 4, where he's usually going drafted for people because he goes in like round 11, he's fallen to round 13 right here, I'll take him as my wide receiver 6, because look, if he just can break out somewhat, 700-800 yard season, a couple of touchdowns, add some rushing yards, that's starting to look good. So I'll take Jameson Williams here. Again, a guy that normally normally speaking, he might be in some of my videos on like do not draft lists when he's getting taken in round 9 on like underdog, 10 and 11 in a lot of season long leagues. In this draft, he fell to the beginning of round 13, kind of like Najee Harris. We got a nice value there. So now I want to quickly look at my roster and see where we're at right now. The goal of what we wanted to do was to get an elite mobile quarterback. We got that. We anchored our team with a running back right away. We didn't want to draft another running back after Breece Hall until like round 7 to 9, but we did take one at the end of round 6, close enough because David Montgomery probably wouldn't have made it. Our wide receivers anchored round 2, Drake London, Jalen Waddle round 4, and Malik Neighbors a great pick in round 5. I think Pat Freiermuth, we had to take him based on where he went. Not a bad option in round 10. Najee Harris fell like a round, so great value. And then these are the guys that are really going to help our team get pushed forward. Chase Brown and Trey Benson have elite upside. Deontay Johnson and Curtis Samuel on new teams, but could be both of their teams' number 1 receivers. And Jameson Williams never going to be his team's number 1 receiver. Maybe not even the number 2 when you have a guy like Sam Laporta there as well. But just the upside that he has, I'm just going to take him because he's my 6th wide receiver this late in drafts. And now we're at a position where we have 6 wide receivers, 5 running backs, a quarterback, and a tight end. I'm still not drafting a quarterback or a tight end right now. So let's just find the best available running back or receiver, ideally younger with upside. So right now I filtered the draft board by the best available running backs and receivers. I mean, I think Zeke would be a great pick right now, but I already have 5 running backs. I'm probably only going to roster 6, and I just don't want to take my other one right now when there's young receivers with upside, like Rashid Shaheed entering his 3rd year. Josh Palmer still on the board. We can keep scrolling. Unfortunately, Dontavian Wicks went. You still have Gabe Davis on a new team here. Let's see, Jahan Dotson, if you're interested in him. Jalen Polk, I think, is a great option, but should be there in a couple of rounds. So if I had to pick somebody right now, I'm going to go ahead and get Rashid Shaheed, and I'll explain why right after we hit this button right here that says draft. Rashid Shaheed has been one of the most efficient receivers through his first 2 seasons in the NFL, despite playing with multiple different quarterbacks in an offense in New Orleans last year that wasn't great. But he fits the mold of a wide receiver that is younger, entering year 3, talented, and now he has a new offensive coordinator in Clint Kubiak, comes over from the 49ers, who really likes to utilize his offenses, the passing game coordinator from last year, getting receivers open, putting them in positions for yards after the catch, which is not something we've seen out of either Chris Olave or Shaheed the past 2 years. It's mostly been downfield options for these guys. We can pull it up on Player Profiler right now. If I pull up Rashid Shaheed's page, you'll see that this guy's mostly being targeted deep downfield. Last year, he ranked top 10 in deep targets. His ADOT, if we were to pull it up right here, top 10 in deep targets per game, 15th overall. ADOT was top 10 as well, average target distance. If he's now getting shorter area targets and ability to run after the catch in round 14 of drafts, that's hard to ignore. And now before we get into these final rounds where you might find some elite upside running backs and rookie receivers, I just want to let you know that over 60% of you are still not subscribed to the channel. I get it, people forget, but this is your urge to do so. We have a goal to get to 50% by week 1, September 5th, that Thursday night game. So hit the subscribe button because it helps this channel out a ton. So we're in round 15 of this draft, and obviously some of the talent is starting to wear down, but a guy that I mentioned earlier, Jalen Polk, is still available, and this is just the obvious pick for me. And I actually just saw bye week 14 here. I just want to let you know, I haven't looked at the bye weeks at all right now. Here's another tip for you. Don't let the bye weeks impact your draft strategy at all. Like if guys are neck and neck and you want to use it as a tiebreaker, sure. But by the time week 14 comes, your team could look totally different with trades, free agent signings, and it just doesn't matter at that point. So it was a little bit sketchy that I only had 4 wide receivers earlier, but now we've gone 4 picks in a row at wide receiver. We just got Jalen Polk, and I'm liking what I'm doing here. Like, look at this. I mean, we got Curtis Samuel, potential wide receiver 1 for his team. Jameson Williams is our upside option, right? Rashid Shaheed, I think that he could be that underneath type player, San Francisco 49ers, Deebo Samuel-esque player in this new Clint Kubiak offense. And then Jalen Polk, who right now in camp is standing out as the hands-down number 1 receiver for the New England Patriots. They drafted him in the 2nd round. He can play all over the field, has the best hands, both at the catch point and just doesn't drop the ball, maybe out of every single rookie receiver in this class. In round 15, that's upside only. There's like no downside in my opinion. So if we were to look through my roster, factoring that we just took 4 wide receivers in a row, we also have Deontay Johnson on the bench. We now have, I think, 8 total wide receivers, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 total wide receivers. And with our running backs, we have 5, 1 tight end and 1 quarterback. This is an 18 round draft. I believe we currently have 15, 16, 17, 4 rounds left in the draft. So I think we can get at least another running back, probably a backup tight end and quarterback. I think that's just at least justifiable to do so at this point and go from there. Now in round 16 of the draft, there's not a lot of great running backs left. There are a couple of decent ones. Like you can see some rookies, Jalen Wright, although he's the running back 3 in his team. I think Braylon Allen, who's currently looking like the backup to Breece Hall, based on this team that we picked, we can get the handcuff there if we want. There's nothing wrong with that. He's a young player, productive player in college. I'm interested to go there, but I'm actually going to go ahead, I think, and get, as of right now, I was going to say Clyde Edwards-Helaire because he's on the Chiefs. They re-signed him, but let's go Braylon Allen. I'm not really a big fan. I don't think you have to handcuff your players, right? The fact that we had Breece Hall with our number 1 overall pick, spending a 16th round pick on his running back, I don't think we're losing much there in terms terms of draft value. And he's a rookie with upside if something happens to Hall. We have our security there. Again, don't handcuff your guys by taking them early, but if you're getting them late and it just happens to work out, fine. Just like the player. Make sure you like the player, and I like Braylon Allen. So now we're in round 17. This is where you can think about getting a backup quarterback. Honestly, I might just roll with Jalen Hurts. Like, I'm going to start him until his bye week, until he gets hurt, and then I can just add another guy. Similar things for Pat Freiermuth, but I'm more interested in getting a backup tight end. So I have 2 spots left. I think I'm going to spend one of them on this guy right here, Jermaine Burton, a rookie wide receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, there's conflicting reports. He was a 3rd-round pick for them. If he didn't have off-field issues, probably would have went in early round 2. He's that talented of a player. And those reports that are conflicting are that people thought he would slide right into the wide receiver 3 role, but as you can see for some Bengals beat reporters and based on what they're seeing right now, Andre Izavas, I'm butchering that. That's just brutal. You guys will probably clip that and make fun of it. But you can see right here, he's still in line. A guy that they took, I believe, last year or the year before in the NFL draft. He's still competing, and this makes sense. Jermaine Burton's new to the offense, right? These veterans who have been there a year or 2 years or a little bit more, sophomores in the NFL, whatever it is, they're going to have the leg up. They know the offense. They know the system in the NFL. This does give you a little bit of worry that, okay, maybe Jermaine Burton isn't going to be the guy right away in 3 wide receiver sets, and he'll rotate, which means he's going to go from playing 50 to 60 to 70% of the snaps to like 30 or 40%, which obviously isn't good. But here's the deal, guys. We're taking him, if you can pull it up right here, we just took him in what? Round 17 of the draft is where I took him right here. Jermaine Burton, my pick, around guys like Kendre Miller, who has another hamstring injury and seems to be in the doghouse due to his injuries. Noah Brown, a wide receiver 4 or 5 on his team. Van Jefferson on the Patriots, or on the Steelers, isn't going to throw. Probably the wide receiver 4 or 5 on his team. So I'm okay to take Jermaine Burton at this point in round 17 as my last skill position player, most likely before getting a backup tight end. All the other guys on the board, I just don't think have the same upside, definitely not same talent profile as Jermaine Burton. And if something happens to T. Higgins and or Jamar Chase, then it's wheels up. Now, the tips for round 17 or 18, if this is how long your draft is to look for a backup quarterback or tight end. But if you just don't want to take one, like you have a Jalen Hurts like I do, then look for an upside rookie running back or younger running back and or a wide receiver. Like I said, I'm not going to go backup quarterback, but I am going to go backup tight end because look what's available. Noah Fant is available. A guy who usually goes in like round 16, fell to round 18. Honestly, if he was my starting tight end in fantasy, I'd be happy with that. So we're getting Noah Fant to close this out. A guy that doesn't have to compete with Will Dissly or Colby Parkinson. Those guys are now gone. It's the Noah Fant room. His only tight end competition right now is AJ Barner, a rookie, and then Pharaoh Brown, mostly a run blocker. So it's Noah Fant and a new offense led by Ryan Grubb, new offensive coordinator, who wants to throw the ball a lot more with 3 wide receiver sets, meaning 1 tight end on the field, which should just lead to more routes, snaps, and targets for Noah Fant. As our backup tight end, him and combined with Pat Freiermuth is a great tight end room. So now if we look over what we just did in this draft here, let's just check the boxes of our strategy. Our strategy was to get a mobile quarterback in round 3 through 5, an elite one ideally. If not, then maybe you get a Kyler later or Jaden Daniels. We got that in Jalen Hurts. We started our draft that was easy by getting Breece Hall. Okay. Then we got a running back in David Montgomery, not until 5 picks later, because we went Breece Hall and were then able to secure our elite quarterback, as well as all of these guys right here, as well as all of these wide receivers, Drake London, Jalen Waddle, Malik Neighbors. Even if you don't like Drake London in round 2 of drafts, okay, fine. But the combination of all these guys is still great, in my opinion, especially when you consider that we have our bench depth of Deontay Johnson, who can easily start over any of those guys at some point this year, if not week 1. Curtis Samuel can be a wide receiver 1 for his team. Same thing for Jalen Polk. And then the upside of guys like Jamison Williams, Rashid Shaheed, and definitely the running backs in Trey Benson, the young guy here, Chase Brown, and even the young guy in Braylon Allen if something was to happen to Breece Hall. I think we have a nice room with upside players, not old guys who might still split a backfield. So this is my strategy. That's kind of the breakdown of it. The guys I want to be targeting, when I want to be targeting them, in terms of how many players of each. We can really load up our wide receiver room late in drafts. Middle-ish rounds is where we can get a lot of those nice running backs as well, around 6 through 9 through 10 with Trey Benson kind of ending that tier of guys you want to run on. So this, in my opinion, is the number 1 strategy for this year, and actually breaking it down through a draft, a real draft, the strategy on how to do so. But if you want to see the running backs that you just don't want to be drafting, we talked about a couple of them in this video, but you need to stop drafting them and taking better guys with upside instead. Well, check out this video right here as we identify the guys you don't want and instead the guys with upside that you do.